Our next speaker is Dr. Navdeep Tangri, who is an MD PhD from the University of Manitoba. He did his residency at McGill University, renal fellowship at Tufts Medical Center, and research fellowships and his PhD also at Tufts Medical Center. He is the scientific director and Chronic Disease Innovation Center, and he is a champion for the ASN Committee for Responsible AI in Kidney Care. He's going to speak to us today about AI in kidney disease. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You can give me a thumbs up that everyone can hear me and see my slides, I hope. Perfect. Great. So first, I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor. And in a way, I'm lucky and unlucky. I'm I guess lucky that I got asked to speak, but unlucky that I got asked to speak about a topic related to AI, an topic that changes sort of week to week, hour to hour sometimes. And perhaps in a way, it's good that I'm talking about AI in kidney care. So maybe keep this in mind while I do this talk, that I'm not talking about AI, the broad AI, the consumer tool we use every day, AI, the what's happening in deep learning or in drug development or in drug hunting. I'm really talking very focused on clinical care and in kidney care. And my entire talk, and actually the whole focus for the ASN Committee for Responsible AI is very, very kidney care, patient care centered all around. These are my disclosures. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, some of the slides I'll present will be created using an AI software called Notebook LM. Now, Notebook LM helps you make nice slides, but ultimately you, as the creator, have to take full responsibility for the content. So it's always good to declare these things up front. So let's start with the ASN guiding principles for responsible AI in kidney care. So I'm proud to be part of the member and lead a group of physician scientists who are all nephrologists or people who work in nephrology. And we came together to publish this paper in JASN last year. And really, we proposed 3 guiding principles. First, we think innovation in medical AI should benefit people with kidney disease, given kidney disease's significant global health burden. We do not want kidney health to be left behind. Second, we think AI should assist nephrology healthcare professionals in providing care, and that the application should always be overseen by healthcare professionals. Now, you have to remember the ASN is a professional organization. We represent nephrologists, so we do not want the nephrologists to be out of the loop. And in fact, we want the opposite. We want leaders in kidney disease and innovation should broaden the use of and the application of AI in providing care for patients with kidney disease. Not only do we not want nephrologists to be out of the loop, we want nephrologists to be leading these efforts in the clinics, private practices, small health systems, and large health systems that they work in. When I think about artificial intelligence, I really orient myself with a clinical lens. I don't think about large language models, agents, deep learning, machine learning. I think CKD, acute kidney injury, dialysis, transplantation, clinical workflow. And I think about how AI is a suite of tools mapped to my clinical workflow and the things I'm trying to answer clinically and from a research perspective, not just a monolith, right? So in the next sort of 40 minutes or so, I'm going to go through applications of artificial intelligence, but I'm going to specifically and intentionally focus them by these areas of chronic kidney disease, acute kidney injury, dialysis, and transplantation. I'm going to try to show you some applications that are really prime time ready, that are in use in practice today. So let's start with Redikid or deep learning. The traditional hurdle in chronic kidney disease, particularly early chronic kidney disease, is that we don't find it. In fact, even when we find it, we don't recognize it, we don't treat it. What do I mean by that? Well, most people, by most, meaning greater than 50% of people, do not have a urine albumin to creatinine ratio when they should have one. That means they have diabetes or hypertension or another condition that makes them high risk, and nobody has tested a urine ACR. So the only way to recognize kidney disease in these people is when the eGFR drops or the creatinine rises. That means half of kidney disease is just not diagnosed. An alternative to this is actually just looking with a fundoscope in the retina. And these investigators from Singapore and other investigators have developed multiple AI algorithms that can actually use deep learning to bypass blood tests entirely and tell you that this patient is likely to have chronic kidney disease. Now, the way to think about it is that deep learning or learning on images is perhaps the best application of AI because no matter how good our regression models become, they simply cannot recognize these types of imaging patterns. And we know from first principles, from basics, that if you have retinopathy, you probably have nephropathy, right? So the eye and the kidney are very closely linked. So we can learn a lot about the health of the kidney from the health of the eye. And that's because these organs share a developmental, physiological pathways. They share the same pathogenic drivers and inflammation, oxidative stress, and they share the same sort of microvascular architecture that gets damaged in whether there's eye disease or kidney disease. So the way this work was done, so think about you have an idea. You're sitting in a place in a research office somewhere. You're like, I think I can learn something about kidney health from the eye. So you take images for fundoscopy. Now they have to be done a certain way. They have to be reasonably accurate. It turns out you can train a layperson to do fundoscopy. Now you have collected a data set, right? And now you can apply deep learning to the data set as long as you have a final label. And that's called supervised learning. That means that you have a data set which has images, you apply a deep learning algorithm, but you have to teach the algorithm, this is CKD, this is not CKD, right? So these investigators from Singapore, this is the one example I'm picking out, took 6,485 people and they developed an internally validated algorithm, deep learning algorithm called CondenseNet, which ingests sort of macula center retinal images at 512 and 512 resolution. Then they externally validated in another data set in Singapore and then an external data set in Beijing. And they produced a classifier, which means something that puts people into one group or another as has CKD, does not have CKD, with a high degree of accuracy. So this model was as accurate as a risk factor model. And of course, the two things together were even more accurate. This could add simple clinical data that somebody who's screening patients can easily pick out, add it to the image, and you get the most accuracy, high sensitivity, high specificity. And even on its own, even without knowing nothing, if you just had images taken for another purpose, you could find which patients should have their kidney function tested. So this image is an excellent example of deep learning and how it applies to chronic kidney disease. And what this can enable you to do, if you think about, is in the field, if you're an employer-based screening in North America, or if you're a field-based screening in India or China, you can just train a layperson to take a retinal camera, which is already used for diabetic retinopathy, and have them used as a first screen. And the people who screen positive here could then go to the lab. So you can do this anywhere where lab equipment or a lab is not widely available. Now, what if labs are available? What if you had access to blood tests? And if you have access to blood tests, there are also different approaches. So there's an approach developed by a company called Renalytics, which developed a tool called Kidney Intel X, and this uses three biomarkers, TNFR1, TNFR2, and I believe KIM1, and it combines them with clinical data to create an algorithm to predict the risk of progression of kidney disease. Here's another tool here called ClinRisk, which uses routine blood work, a CBC, a metabolic panel, and urine ACR to predict the progression of kidney disease. And both of these are very accurate in finding who's going to progress based on just blood tests largely. There are also other applications using blood tests. You can construct digital twins and patient replicas predicting CKD onset. So the patient in front of you can have a lab-matched twin in a way, and you can figure out what happened to them. Let's kind of think of it as the next generation of a propensity score in a way. Now, one approach to this is taken by ClinRisk, as I mentioned, and there are a few other applications of lab testing and AI here. So the way the ClinRisk test is done, a patient goes for a routine blood test, a CBC, a chemistry, and a urine ACR. The standard lab tests come to a cloud, and an algorithm is generated to create a risk score and a full personalized risk and guideline directed care plan. So this part, this analysis part here, is deep learning. It's a machine learning. It's a random forest model, which is a series of decision trees. And this personalized risk and guideline directed care plan is done by creating both a rules-based engine as well as a large language model. So let me show you how that works. So first, a rules-based engine takes all the patient's labs and maps them to the relevant clinical practice guidelines. So you take the KDIGO guidelines, you say, okay, this patient's GFR is this, their ACR is this, they need to be monitored 3 times a year, this is their blood pressure target, referral indicated as per the guidelines. As per recommendation, they probably benefit from a RAS, SGLT2, MRA. Do they have anemia? Do they have metabolic acidosis? All of these things can be learned from the lab alone. So that's rules-based. And then here is the LLM piece. So then you take that report, that same report, you use an LLM, and you can create a patient language summary. So I think this is really a underutilized part today, but growing rapidly, of large language models and machine and artificial intelligence in our patient care, is that you can take medical test data and explain it really easily to patients. So how many times have I had to explain to a patient, this is kidney function and this is kidney damage. eGFR is how well your kidneys clean your blood, and ACR is how much active damage there is in your kidneys. The higher your ACR, the more holes in the filter means there's more damage. So you can really explain all of this clearly to patients. Other people have also developed models based on lab data. This is a nice model developed by Sonic Labs, predicts 30% decline in GFR. Now, this one includes also deep learning, machine learning, and also this one includes eGFR slope, UACR, albumin, the initial value at the slope, age, sex at the initial GFR. Now, the challenge with this model is it includes slopes of both eGFR and albumin, so it requires quite a bit of historical data. And anything that requires historical data is not just challenging in the US, where people are having their labs done in all sorts of different places, but it really in any health system worldwide. This is the kidney intellex piece. So this is TNFR, TNFR2, and KIM1. Now here, these are combined with a number of clinical features and produce good accuracy in this FDA-cleared model, which has been tested in Canvas and Credence and well to predict prognosis in diabetic kidney disease. So when I think about all of these, I've shared with you in the first 10 minutes of this talk a lot of applications about AI and chronic kidney disease. Now, chronic kidney disease is a good setup. In fact, all of nephrology is a very good setup for machine learning because we are, in the end, a lab-based specialty. Labs tell so much of the story. I was happy to follow Dr. Kurhan's excellent talk today, and it makes me think that that so much of what we see, for example, in a litholink profile and in other stone profiles, could now just simply be done using a good language model, which can create a really nice report with visuals and guidance for patients based on their urinary data, as long as that data is reliable. The underlying data is reliable. Perhaps the most data-rich environment in nephrology is dialysis. So in dialysis, there's obviously a lot of data that we generate from labs and from the patient's blood pressures and so on. There's actually a very large amount of data generated from the machine as well. So in dialysis, you can predict things that are happening within the treatment, such as intradialytic hypotension or cramps. And you can also predict things that are happening in between treatments, like suggesting the right iron and ESA doses and predicting hospitalization risk. In home dialysis, you can sort of, and in in-center dialysis, you can really construct these data lakes, which include vital signs, demographics, labs, genomics, a data thread, and you can use this data lake, this data warehouse, to host a number of applications, such as an anemia control model, which I'll talk about a little bit, intradialytic hypotension, which I'll talk about a little bit, and even AI-assisted dry weight. A lot of this is meant to take out that visit-to-visit variability, that physician-to-physician variability that is entrenched in how we practice medicine, right? Like, I'm a CKD person, so I'll just pick on one example of chronic kidney disease. So even in work that my group has done, when we've looked at 200 to 300 across 200 to 300 providers and 40 to 50,000 patients who met every single criteria for getting an SGLT2 inhibitor, there was 4 to 5-fold variability in prescribing between different providers. Now, every provider thinks that they're better than the average, but it just goes to show that variability is a massive problem. And I firmly believe that models can help us reduce variability. So let's start a little bit by home dialysis. So this work from Fresenius and their group at the Renal Research Institute, which is their research arm, showed that you could take data from incident patients and very quickly stratify who'd be better sorted for peritoneal dialysis or home hemodialysis. And when you put this into practice, you can increase home dialysis penetration all the way from 17 to greater than 27%, which is where they're trying to go. The other great thing about home dialysis is that you also have an additional layer of data. A lot of my patients who are on PD have this cycler called ShareSource, which is a Baxter product. And what they do is I'm able to see through this bidirectional cloud-connected platform what are their fill times, what are their drain times, how much are they actually ultrafiltering, are they missing treatments, and it allows me to do a lot of human decision making, but it also lends itself really well to development of machine learning tools and clinical decision support, even prompts. You can see how if a patient has missed a treatment, a good, well-designed AI bot could tell the patient, "Hey, I noticed that you didn't do a treatment. Was there any reason? Do you want to get in touch with your nurse?" Or if the patient has had minimal ultrafiltration and rising weight in the last 2 or 3 days, it could just, "Hey, I think it looks like you're gaining weight and you haven't removed enough fluid. Do you want to consider a higher concentration of PD bags?" Right? So you can see all these very logical applications can be activated and implemented and help us enhance care. So, and when you do this, if you do it in a proper way, you can achieve sort of superior blood pressure control, enhanced quality of life, better healthcare utilization, and more program retention, which is an important systemic impact. PD programs that retain a lot of patients tend to do well because they just have a lot of experience. Again, here we believe that these agents which can go as far as talking to the patient, and if the patient says yes, adjust my troubleshoot my machine, adjust my prescription, can go do that, but they need to do it within the boundaries set by the care team, right? And the idea would be that, let's say on PD or peritoneal dialysis, that the agent or the bot would have access to the entire sort of Baxter or Fresenius or whatever cycler it is training module, so they can answer technical support questions. But they should also have some limits to what they can change in the prescription, with or without getting explicit permission or oversight from the nurse. Ultimately, we really very much still believe in the human clinical care team as the guardrail. But what we want to do is use technology to reduce friction, to handle the lowest order, the simplest questions, so that we can focus on the more difficult conversation on patient retention in home dialysis. So now just sort of shifting paradigm. Now let's talk about the best use cases of machine learning or AI. So the best use cases are when it's just math, right? I love using AI when it's math because we're not even talking about de-skilling, right? When the calculator was invented, it didn't de-skill arithmetic, or we don't say, "Oh, calculators are terrible because they de-skill arithmetic." Determining the next ESA dose for a patient is basically a calculator. You need to know the last ESA dose. You need to know the trends. You need to know if they have what their iron stores are, and if they have an active infection going on, right? So the anemia control model, and I'm going to highlight one that's been published in the literature by Len and the RRI group, that particular model just does that math for you, math that we don't do so well in our head. So not only does the anemia control model actually lead to balanced hemoglobin, and which we'll talk about that, but in one particular study, it was actually shown to result in a lower rate of hospitalization. And in this study, they looked at 3,900 patients who either went through anemia control model, guided care, or standard care. And what they found was that the anemia control model, which takes in the current hemoglobin, the ferritin, and the history, the trends of all of these lab data in the last 120 days, plus dialysis data, and it optimized the ESA and iron dose by applying a reward function. So the way anemia control models work is they work by a carrot and stick, or like by a chess move, right? So a good move is, we know what a good move is in chess, those of you who've ever played chess before, but think about like if you gain an advantage so if you pick the right dose, the model gets a thumbs up or a reward. And if you predict the wrong dose, where the patient ends up with a too high of a hemoglobin or too low of a hemoglobin, you get a penalty. And you could probably penalize really high doses more than slightly low doses. So not all penalties are the same. And if you apply this right rewards infrastructure, a model can be trained to determine exactly the right dose. And it turns out when you use a model, you may have a 12% lower risk of hospitalization. And why might that be? Well, it's just because there is no, there's less fluctuations in hemoglobin. There's probably less transfusions. It might be less thrombosis. There might be less access-related stuff. No, there's no survival benefit. Well, survival benefit is very, very hard to achieve. Pretty much only thing I've seen achieve a survival benefit has really largely been fish oil. So a model cannot achieve a survival benefit, but that's not what should be needed. The bar for clearance for a model should be, does it improve safety and efficiency? Is it safe? And does it help you give the lowest possible dose of ESA while maintaining the hemoglobin? Because that's what we're all after, right? We want the lowest possible dose of ESA while maintaining the hemoglobin in target. To me, I wanted to discuss this because I think the gold standard for the utility of AI in almost every other area, we can have debate whether is it helping us, is it really helping us? Even scribes, right? There's people who hate scribes, there's people who love scribes. When you get down to a randomized trial, they save users a minute here or a minute there, probably 30 to 60 minutes over the course of a week. But where there's very little debate for me is just math, when it's just automating math. An anemia control model is a really good use case where if you believe in math, you should believe in a machine learning model for determining anemia. So other dialysis applications are just showing you one that we've developed, which should tackle unplanned hospitalization. Unplanned hospitalizations are a big deal in dialysis. They're lost revenue for dialysis centers. They're big for patients. They cause morbidity. They make patients frail, and they often have a high risk of readmission. So here we trained a model on 28,000 patients, CAT Boost. It's a different type of machine learning model, 4.5 million dialysis treatments, and then validated on 5,000 patients, got down to 20 key features. And we found key features and a really good prediction towards the diagonal, where what we observed for hospitalization risk was actually what was predicted. And high-risk patients had a more than 50% chance of having a hospitalization, and low-risk patients had a less than 1 in 7 chance of having a hospitalization. So the reason I show this is not because a regression model can't predict hospitalization or because this is some unique specialized model that we've created that nobody else could, but to actually show you workflow. So the way we put this model in the chart is we put it right in the electronic medical records. This is an EMR called Dialysis Manager. And for each model, for whether it's hospitalization or anemia risk, you sort of get a new suggested dose for anemia or a new action to take for hospitalization right in the EMR. So all of these models, no matter which model I do, work only when there's a real actionable thing that you can do in the EMR. Now let's focus on transplantation. Let's focus on transplantation. So in transplantation, models can be used to boost living donation, optimize organ matching, and look at post-transplant outcomes. So first, a machine learning model has been shown to predict patients at risk of failing evaluation to reduce disparities. NLP has been used to actually look at social media posts and Reddit posts to identify digital sentiment, to identify barriers. And of course, sort of a risk scoring or a math use, which is AI versions of the KDPI or EPTS indices, which tend to cover some better interactions. And finally, models, just like the anemia control model, you can develop a tacrolimus dosing model, and that can be used to integrate genetic polymorphisms and to minimize toxicity and rejection. Sorry. jumping a slide here. Okay. So the first problem that in transplant that I want to focus on is why people drop out. So my colleague on our ASN AI committee, Amy Waterman, looked at 9,000 patients who were referred for transplant. And of the 9,000 who were referred, she found only 54% actually showed up for an initial evaluation. And of those, half dropped out again until to actually only half of those actually made it to the wait list. And of those, a third dropped out. They became inactive or untransplanted. And the cool thing, this is where clinical meets AI. So she could have just applied an AI model to figure out why anybody's dropping out at any stage. But what Amy and her colleagues knew was that there were different factors that lead to dropout initially versus dropout at waitlisting versus dropout after waitlisting. So they actually developed 3 separate models, right? So in the referral stage, they developed an XGBoost model, which predicts evaluation initiation within 6 months. And then once you get to an evaluation, there was a random forest model that predicts successful waitlisting within 12 months. And after the waitlist, there was another random forest that predicts dropout or permanent removal. So because the factors are just different and there's actionable risk tiers and you can find a high risk group in each stage who may benefit from a little bit of extra support, that little bit of extra transplant coordinator support or perhaps a social worker support to really figure out why they're dropping out. So at the referral stage, race, African American race, and at the evaluation stage had a big effect, whereas the waitlist stage, which is Hispanic ethnicity. So socioeconomic factors like unemployment and lower education had a big effect at the across all stages, but aging had a bigger effect through evaluation. So I guess if you're an older adult, you perhaps get frustrated at the long evaluation stage, and you might drop out. And clinical factors had very low impact at the referral stage, but severe comorbidities made the biggest difference once you were waitlisted, right? And particularly diabetes. So what you can see is that you need the clinical knowledge to build the model and to design the study in the best way. You simply cannot just plug all the data in and try to mix all of these things together. And what Amy and colleagues found that there was this disproportionate impact on underserved communities. And we know a lot of tech companies and other things which tell us that you just need a digital tool, you just need an app, or you just need a platform to get at these patients and keep them engaged. But actually, digital exclusion really skewed towards minority patients, right? So people who are higher deprived and people from minority communities, they are the least likely to benefit from a digital solution. So we need a more human solution for them. Now, where digital aids can work and when they can help you empower barriers is you need there's different ones for pre-transplant education and different ones for post-transplant care. So early on, you need more culturally tailored apps and digital storytelling, and post-transplant, remote patient monitoring, smart devices, and telepharmacy can be helpful. So Amy and colleagues did some more work in this. They looked at explored transplant at home. They developed some socioeconomically and culturally tailored platforms, animated videos, modules directed, and then they measured the results. They resulted in increased knowledge and active pursuit of transplant. They developed everything in Spanish, which contributed to a 91% growth in waitlist additions of Hispanic people. And then they developed an I Choose Kidney and a My Transplant Coach, which resulted in knowledge improvement across racial and ethnic groups. And this is the kind of really neat work that can be accelerated by artificial intelligence, by coding assistants, by translators. So it's not that this work is new because of AI. This work is faster because of an AI. Because with AI tools, coding tools and such, you can develop a transplant coach, a chatbot, a simple application. You can translate documents easily. You perhaps can even take a video and animate it. So these things happen faster. They don't happen because of AI. They just happen faster because of AI. There's also they found more in the simple math tool. They found that tacrolimus levels could be something that could be solved through math, so through a machine learning algorithm they had patients who had self-monitored with smart pillboxes, Bluetooth cuffs, data loaded to the cloud in zero time, so similar to PD and home dialysis. A pharmacist reviewing the data and alerts, so this was very helpful. And really what you're trying to do is create a human technology co-care model, right? So you have AI risk stratification, continuous monitoring, scalable medical education, which are all the technology piece, which are now better, faster because of the technologies we have today. But you need the human expertise, which is the emotional intelligence, the complex decision support, and a behavioral coaching and empathy, right? Like to even go out and try to answer these questions means you believe in empathetic care. And again, we keep coming back to these same principles where technology handles the basics, the baseline education, the data, makes things easier, and it frees up clinicians to provide personalized empathetic care to high risk patients, which may be identified by the technology. So one really cool study that I just wanted to focus in my last couple of minutes on transplant, they wanted to look at either a ChatGPT type model or a specialized model with expert human labeled paddling on Reddit posts about transplant. And they categorized the posts into signal and noise. And they looked at either like current direct, which is, are you involved with a transplant, or indirect, I need help finding a kidney for somebody, or past direct or indirect posts. And they looked for certain themes that were showing up again and again in these posts and communities. So what they found here was that a specialized structure, a specialized NLP structure like a BERT, consistently outperformed general models for intent classification, right? So particularly as we get more nuanced, as we use language in a different way, as we sort of humans, sometimes we write something and we say something, but that's not really quite what we mean. And when you look at that in the online community, right, sometimes people are writing things, but that's coming from a place of fear. So the more nuance was added, as more nuance was added, the BERT models and with specialized NLP structures did better than ChatGPT models. So we're going to have lots of time for questions. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the key things that I've summarized in the last little while. So first, I think artificial intelligence has already developed and created highly relevant applications in every aspect of kidney care, just like it has in every aspect of our lives, right? I mean, there's not perhaps a single website that or storefront or business that you encounter that's perhaps not using AI in some way. And I think our patients and colleagues, allied health, other specialists are all using AI tools, and we should also responsibly use them. Particularly, we want nephrologists to lead and not to follow, right? One thing that I think is really important is that I think our patients are using these tools. And I think it doesn't do us well when we try to discourage them. I actually think if I tell my patient that they have IgA nephropathy, that's an immune system disease which can affect their kidneys, and I tell them to look it up in this way in Gemini or ChatGPT, or whether they use open evidence or whatever they use, I think they're getting better information than they did from Google 5 years ago, right? Because it's much more curated. It's at least the by the probabilistic way that these algorithms work, the best information is filtering to the top. And as simply, I think perhaps most importantly, is that they are going to use it whether we like it or not. And so ignoring it makes it worse. And in fact, I think when I think about, us looking at two separate patients in front of us, right? So there's a patient who has a diagnosis no one can figure out. That patient uses an AI tool, comes to you with a potential differential diagnosis. And if you completely dismiss it because it's coming from an AI tool, and later it ends up being, I think, this is the kind of scenario that causes a problem. Whereas I think if we listen and we say, well, that's a possibility, and we think about it just as we would think about any other diagnosis, I think we're better off. I think we also should recognize that some patients may have access to their entire chart, their entire record, all their scans, all their labs, And if they're giving all that information to ChatGPT Health or some other large language model, that large language model may have access to 10 years of data from 10 different specialists, and we may be operating in a silo where we're only seeing that patient one time. It's our first encounter and our first visit. So it's no surprise sometimes if that model may have a little more information there's a real information asymmetry, right? So I think that's a really important message. I think we should be responsible and we should not just discourage things. I really like this idea of a clinical orientation to a problem. Here's a clinical problem, and do I need AI? Do I not need AI? AI is not the solution to lots of the clinical problems I see. Sometimes it can be helpful, and when it is helpful, we should use it, right? And tools available today can augment care. They can make care better, faster, more accurate, but they do not replace care. They're not autonomous, right? Like, I mean, I think you've heard a lot about the Doctronic sort of a refill experiment in Utah where patients can get refills. That's that's on the borderline of augment and autonomous. I don't think that refills for a stable patient who's been on a medication for months is the worst thing to give to AI. I think it's okay. I think some of these things still should be automated. Do we want to spend 13 years in medical school residency and fellowship to hoard refills as our domain? Perhaps not, right? So I think we should think about higher order tasks and higher order learning. Um, ASN, myself, others in our group, we still very much are strong believers in the human in the loop mandate. We think, we get AI insights, we add human judgment, we take clinical action, we improve data, that generates better AI insights. We love using algorithms for narrowly defined tasks, right? Whenever there's just math like ESA dosing, tacrolimus dosing, or just lab-based diagnosis, AI is wonderful, right? But it can't replace the holistic, nuanced judgment of a clinician. So when I think about the kind of decisions I dealt in my clinic today about somebody who's now lost enough kidney function that they need to start preparing about kidney replacement therapy, that's not an AI conversation, right? And I think the success of any of these AI tools also depends very much on how integrated they are, not just their predictive accuracy. The burden of proof or the burden of work to build a tool has gone down a lot. It was already pretty low with advanced statistics and computing, but anybody can build a model really. But the only models that get used are ones that are clinically intuitive and available right in the point of care, that don't make you go outside, do a bunch of extra clicks, a bunch of extra screens. And if you're going to ask the user to go outside of their workflow, you better deliver something wonderful. Okay. And finally, I think the ultimate goal is to leverage AI not just for the tech novelty, but to advance innovation in high burden disease areas for continuous benefit of the patient. I think the tools will continue to evolve. There's a wide variety of them, and whatever tool you're using that helps you take better care of your patient is fine. I definitely did not want to spend this talk saying use open evidence, use ChatGPT, use Doximity GPT. Whatever you're using that helps you do your work better, faster, more accurately is the best tool for you. So with that, I'll hand off. Here are some references, and happy to take questions with the panel.